Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first week of June. Can't believe it is already June 6th. I feel like where the heck did spring go? Like it is gone, and here we are, like pressing down on summer, right? Um, we're really excited to have Leslie here with us this week. Cariel, I don't know, what's he got? Like kids graduating or something? I don't know what the hell's going on
Hmm.
with him.
Who schedules that on a Thursday at noon?
I know, really? But I guess it is June and graduations do happen this time of year. It's funny because, one of our other people, like their kids got out of school like a week and a half ago. And I'm like, I know when I was in school, we didn't get out until like the week before 4th of July. So, like, what is
That's
up with
late.
everybody getting out so early now? Like, they should be in school till like August. No, I'm kidding. So, anyways, Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard. We're really excited to continue our journey here on SOC 2 stuff. Leslie, why don't you take a moment and say hello? Tell us about you. While you do that, I'm going to make sure we're getting the socials running.
You went on mute, Tim, but my name is Leslie, and I'm head of growth for Securely. And I actually have an education background. So every conversation that I have with a customer or potential customer, I'm looking through the lens of educating them. So I'm excited to have this conversation today and shed some light on some misnomers and best practices.
Awesome. And while you were doing that, I was making sure we got the lives going well over there, right? And so let's kind of recap a little bit from last week. I know you weren't here last week, so I'll kind of make some high level bullet points about our session last week, which we really talked about the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability management, right? We talked about the automated aspect versus the human powered, right? Leslie, I don't know if you
Mm.
had an opportunity to listen to last week's or participate in that at all, but the whole human powered versus I run Burp Suite, so I'm doing a penetration test. Did you
Yeah,
have any
I caught some of
opportunity
it.
to? Yeah.
I caught some of it. I think it's important to kind of have that human element. Same thing with AI, double check AI work, double check, automated work. It's important to, have a second set of eyes or, a human set of eyes and hands on keyboard. I think especially when it comes to security.
Yeah. So, and I think that's, I think we talked a lot about like what are the like components, right? So as MSPs, we totally understand the vulnerability scanning, right? We understand like finding those areas and those things that could be exploitable, right? Oh, and look, Haley's joining us. Let me pull up Haley here, which means then I need to rearrange our background a little bit here. Hold on one second. We're gonna do this one, and we're gonna do this one, and we're gonna do that one. There we go. Maybe this one. Much better.
Oh, that's
Hey,
fun. I like that.
Fancy.
Happy
hello,
summer.
Haley.
Hello.
Why don't you take a second and introduce yourself for our listening audience as well?
Okay. Hi, I'm Haley. I am the cybersecurity customer success representative for Securely. So I handle all things in regards to the Securely dashboard, and I coordinate with the pen tester, take care of pen test reporting and vulnerability reporting to our customers.
Gotcha. So you probably might have a little bit of some of the technical knowledge that I'm gonna, you know, try to stump. No, not gonna try to stump Leslie with. Maybe Leslie's gonna stump me with it. Who knows? But it's really great to have you here. Nice to meet you as well. So we were just kind of recapping last week, talking about the differences between a vulnerability scan and like a true pen test, right? Not sure if you had an opportunity to watch last week's, but the whole automated burp suite nmap versus like actually having a human, right? So Leslie, you were saying before Haley popped in.
I just, I know we're going to talk about a Reddit thread today, and there's a Reddit channel, TLI5, like tell me like I'm five. And I love that. And I love that analogy. I love to kind of talk in that manner, and I speak to a lot of, we're a cybersecurity company for people who aren't technical. Like that's their entry point, right? We speak with a lot of CEOs, and they may not have kind of the breadth of knowledge as their CTO, but they're in a situation where they need to start talking about penetration testing. They don't know what it is, or they think it's vulnerability scanning, or what's vulnerability scanning versus pen testing. And this is my TLI5 analogy for it. Is vulnerability scanning is me walking around your house. I'm rattling your windows and doors. I'm kind of seeing where I can perhaps, make access or entry into your home, but I'm not really there to break anything, right? I'm just kind of seeing, I'm casing your house essentially, right? Because I'm going to go back later. So, and then the difference is a penetration test is I've cased your house. I know where the access points are in your areas of most vulnerability. And now I'm actually going to exploit those. I'm going to go in your house, whether I have a key, right? Like a white box, or I'm going to break a window like a black box. I don't have any information. I go into your house, and now I'm going to actually start wreaking havoc and seeing what I can break and where I can, do the most damage, and take advantage of the situation. So that's kind of like how I explain TLI5, the difference between vuln scanning and penetration testing to someone who doesn't know anything about it.
And well, I mean, you know me, I love storytelling, and I love to be able to break things down into TLI, but like tell me like I'm 5. In fact, a lot of the things that we've been playing with lately is, and now reword this like I'm a 5th grader.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as even as like MSPs, we are generally highly technical people. And we get into the ones and zeros and the bytes and bits and the like Haley, I would imagine you kind of hear these things like, tell me, how do you deal with control 7249 that talks about IAM, PAM, XYZ? Like, I would imagine you probably have to deal with that as well, right?
Not too much. So when it gets down to like the technical, that's where I usually refer to the experts. I like to say I'm your person that goes between the expert,
There you
and
go.
kind of helps soften it. So I will talk to the pen tester when it gets down to like the details. If the customers have anything where they need things explained a little bit more explicitly in a way that's easier to understand, that's where I come in. So that's kind of my like bread and butter, is basically being that person who kind of sits between the person who's highly technical
So,
and between somebody who's not, and explain it in a way that's still technical-ish,
right.
but a little
So
bit easier to stomach.
She's the
so
translator.
you are the human powered, tell it to me like I'm 5.
Yes, yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
Right?
that's
Who
me.
needs Chat GPT when we have a Haley, right?
Yes, that's pretty much me.
That's
And
awesome.
I answer, like, I'll ask the right questions when it comes to like the pen tester of, okay, but they're not going to understand this because I'm not understanding it. So can you explain what you mean by this? So I'll get into like the weeds with them so our customers don't have to.
That's awesome. Yeah, because as MSPs, as I said, we're pretty highly technical, and we tend to focus on how do I check the box, how do I like check, move on, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing about penetration tests, at least like human powered ones, is it's not just a checkbox exercise. Can we run some tools, right, Leslie? Can we find some things? But as we learned in last week's session, actively exploiting them like a human, right? I think that's the key component that we're missing when we talk about SOC 2, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we should just dive right in, right? Because we're going to get into this little bit of a spicy topic here and talk about. I know that was my Team Tim banner, but okay, a little bit of spicy topics, right? Even though Team Tim, when we're on compliance, we're right. But let me pull this up here, right? So let me do share screen and share an entire screen. And I think I want this one over here. There we go. So we all love Reddit, right? And we all love, heading over there and getting some flames up. And there has been such an uptick around SOC 2 and ISO over the last couple of weeks on SOC 2. I mean, I'm just kind of poking around here. I did a quick little search this morning on SOC 2, and there's there's so many things that MSPs and small businesses are asking for when it comes to SOC 2, right? And so before we dive in too deep, let me grab and make sure I have the right one. Let's talk a little bit about what the hell is a SOC 2, right? Leslie, do you have any insight? Tell it to me like I'm 5 around SOC 2.
Yeah. So SOC 2 is a framework that has 5 trust service criteria. And really, you have to have policies in place for one of those criteria in order to get SOC 2 certified, and that one is security. So the whole purpose is to ensure that you have the right procedures and policies in place for your organization, so that you're doing your due diligence on the front end to prevent any sort of like breach of information, or whether it's onboarding an employee and having background checks, or making sure that they have the right access tools or just-in-time access on their computers, password protection. But then, so all the way from the human element, so it can actually involve HR and your policies around hiring and also offboarding employees, all the way then to your internal infrastructure about keeping your maybe your web application secure, identifying vulnerabilities within your system, actually remediating those vulnerabilities, and then having a plan in place to where if, oops, something does happen, that you have an outlined plan in place, that leadership teams have done an exercise and actually acted out a dress rehearsal of what would it look like if we did have a cybersecurity incident. So that way, your fire drill, fire happens, you actually know how to exit the building and do it safely. Run, don't walk. So, or
Wait,
walk, don't run.
We were just talking about school and graduations, and I think I saw this on LinkedIn earlier. Big IT conference happened this week. From our Wise Connect friends that had something going on in Orlando, and our good friend of ours, Robert, was talking about how his MSP got taken down from a actual incident, and during his talk, the fire alarm went off at the hotel, at the conference venue, right? And so I love the analogy of like the fire drill, right? Because I don't know, I used to do those all the time in school. Not that I was the one pulling the alarm or anything, but they happened, right? And so as an MSP, you're right, like being able to conduct drills, right? Being able to conduct penetration tests with actual people, so that we're better prepared for when a real incident actually happens, right? And so I love that fire drill analogy. Funny story, when I went through one of my first FedRAMP authorizations years and years ago, I got dinged on 2 things. One of them was I didn't talk about flooding in my documentation, and the second one was, while we had fire suppression in the server room, it was not halon. It was not the actual like electronic fire, like the right stuff. So they dinged us on that. Right. And so, yeah, getting into this topic today, right, about being required or not required. I know I've done a little research. Leslie, you've done a little research. Haley, have you heard from any of your partners that talk about, I have to do it, it's required?
Yeah, it's come up. It's typically not, but if they put it in the policy, it definitely is. So that's the thing, that's one of the catch-alls, is depending on what they're telling their customers, what they're writing in their policies. If it's in writing, then it's definitely required. But even if it's not required, I would say it's necessary, because you don't want to have something happen where basically you get hacked, customer information gets out, your reputation goes down, and then possibly your stakeholders are doing their due diligence and they find out you passed up on doing a pen test and that was something that you could have done. It definitely helps to have that in place, because then it at least says I took the responsibility to try to protect myself. So it's definitely very important, even if it's not necessary, but definitely if it's inside the policy, it's necessary.
And I think that That's
Okay.
important to note. It's like SOC 2, ISO 27001, they don't require penetration tests, but it is the best practice. But you can meet the control, in several different ways. Like you can have, a security assessment, you can do vulnerability scanning, you can do compliance assessments, and third-party assessments, but penetration testing is kind of like the best of all of them, but it has more than one, right? Don't just rely on penetration testing because that's a point in time. Going back to SOC 2, like SOC 2 type 1, point in time, snapshot in time. That's your security posture, your compliance with the SOC controls. The single point in time, I took a picture, right? SOC 2 type 2 is not we're in it for the long haul. We're live streaming for 6 months and maintaining that continuous compliance over the course of a longer period of time. So the penetration testing, it works really great for being able to capture your vulnerabilities or escalation of privileges or in the middle of things that you just can't do with an automated scan, whether it's Burp Suite or like a pen test grade tool, great. But there are things that you just can't do with a scanner. It happens at one point in time, and then the vulnerability scanning, that helps you maintain continuous compliance during that window of time, especially if you have an application, you're updating your application, you're doing patches, sending out updates. There's all sorts of opportunities for a port to be left open or misconfiguration. I hear Haley talk about that all the time. So, I think it's good practice to do a penetration test, but also to have something that's more continuous in place.
Yeah. So I'll go back to that kind of policy and procedure part, right? So one thing that we talked last week is about scoping, right? So when we're doing our SOC 2 or our ISO or any actual risk management framework for that matter, how are we scoping that, right? Are we talking about certain roles, certain devices, certain endpoints, certain things? But what can trip you up is if in your documentation, you now scope in a penetration test, right? And I think a lot of people, we talk about this a lot because, we have a huge library of documents and templates that we, offer to our customers. But we talk about be careful what you could end up scoping in. And not just scoping in, but saying you're doing something when you don't actually do it, right? That's actually the risk, right? Not necessarily like, my incident response, my disaster, my document X, Y, or Z said, oh yeah, we do regular evaluations of our stuff, and you don't actually do it.
So I think it's interesting that you're bringing this up. I literally had a conversation with a customer the other day who said they needed to do a pen test because it was required by SOC 2. I was like, well, it's not a requirement. And they were like, well, yes, it is. It's in our policy. We put it in there because it's required. Okay. I'm not going to argue on that. That's fine. It's great to do a penetration test. I'm starting to think why do people think this? Why do people constantly tell me it's a requirement of SOC 2? I think it's because of templates, right? Templates have these best practices. We're using all sorts of different compliance tools. And think about writing your policies from scratch. Templates are wonderful. We use templates. Templates are excellent. But you have to also recognize that a template can be customized and it's editable, and that that there's best practices within that template, but it's not necessarily going to be relevant to your industry. So you also have to look at that. Do you need quarterly pen tests? Probably not, but there are certain industries that absolutely should, like fintech, right? Or maybe, if you're dealing with sensitive patient health data. So in that situation, yeah, quarterly pen tests are really great, but you also have to, I think, be reflective of your own internal capabilities of handling a quarterly pen test, your budget for performing a quarterly pen test. So do we have the budget to maintain this program? Do we have the resources to actually handle, when we have vulnerabilities come up, that we can then do something about it? So you have to think long term when you're creating your policies, because these things you're going to be held to them. Your auditor's going to hold you to them.
Yeah, you hit a hot button. Wait, hold on. Let's do this. Hold
on.
Do
you have an image for that?
You hit a hot button. You hit a hot button. So, all right, I'm just going to do this, right? So templates. templates are great-ish, right? Having been writing policy documentation for, over 20 years at this point, um, you know, there were no templates 20 years ago. We literally had to write this stuff from scratch, right? And as the market progressed and as everybody kept asking on the Reddits and everywhere else, give me a template. The problem with templates is they can pose risk, especially if you don't tailor them and align them appropriately, right? And so, a little bit of a plug here. Our templates at Compliance Scorecard are vastly different than what you'll see across the internet. Number one, they come with our 20 years of experience. Number two, there's actually a section in each portion of the individual document that talks about, how do I do this? Explain this to me like a fifth grader. Help me write this section. And then where in those things a particular section should be modified, it is big, bold, red, yellow, like flashing in your face. So either leave this out or modify it to fit your needs, right? So there's a lot of great template programs and platforms and things across the interwebs that are out there. One of our key differentiators is that we take the time to teach you. We point out the potential pitfalls in the document before you make it an actual document. And we help you align that document to the actual business practices in place and not just copy paste company name, right? So your mileage will vary with templates. As it relates to SOC 2 here, be careful it doesn't scope in a penetration test by accident because you did not take the time to tailor it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I am off my template.
So billion%. Yeah,
So today's conversation, we're about halfway through. I want to bring this up here. Oops. Let's bring this up here, right? So I am in the middle of my audit and they said I need, all right, so as a person that lives in absolutes, right? Need versus must versus have to versus nice to have, I need a pen test done. And if you start digging through here, I mean, it's Reddit, so there's some actually really good responses. Grouchy, spicy pickle. Gotta love that Reddit name. Reddit names are fun, are they not? There's this like a vulnerability test is not a pen test. Absolutely, we talked about that earlier, right? Goes through the stuff. I also love the plug the tool, right? Plug the thing that I'm doing, but this whole thing, I'm in the middle of the audit. Okay, there's the first indicator. I'm in the middle of my audit. All right, so anybody that knows anything about SOC 2, for example, what's the first thing that happens around SOC 2? We talked about it a few minutes ago.
Scoping. Having conversations.
Exactly.
Yeah, the fact that this person says, I'm in the middle of my audit, and then now they're telling me, the auditor is telling me what I need. That's like an immediate disconnect, right? Mm-hmm. And that the right stakeholders weren't involved in the conversation. Mm-hmm. That's my 2 cents on that, Mm-hmm. So who wrote the policies is clearly not this person. But but then why are they the ones, that are then having to deal with the auditor? I think that there needs a lot more transparency involved. Or maybe, they used a template. Who knows?
Right. And so herein lies the first part of the challenge of I'm in the middle of my audit and they said I needed a thing. Penetration test in this portion, right? And so how is that scoped, right? And as we talked about 10 minutes ago, did you accidentally scope penetration testing into the audit because you grabbed some template someplace, right? So that was the first red flag as I was reading through this. Number one, I'm in the middle of my audit, and I didn't know I needed to do a penetration test. All right, so from the very beginning, you didn't necessarily scope it appropriately or have what are the requirements or have the pieces and parts necessary. Now, who knows, maybe maybe this is just the end technician. I don't know. I don't know enough about the company and their details and their organization, but something like a penetration test should be part of that scoping conversation. We're going through our SOC 2 and ISO. We explicitly said we want penetration test, as well as vulnerability management, as well as code reviews, as well as SDLC, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. Well, A, because we're a compliance company, and B, because we're writing software. So we explicitly put that in the beginning. We knew we needed to do this. The how we were going to do it, the who, maybe I could just point over here. Wait, I'm backwards. There we go. The who was going to do it was still up in the air back then, but we knew we were going to do it. So it was not a surprise to us, right? So I would say that's the first piece. It wasn't a surprise for us.
And just like speaking of surprises, I mean, a lot of people don't like surprises, but especially when they can be very costly. And I will just, like, shameless plug here. I think Securely is like one of the most reasonable platforms for having a real manual pen test. But when you're in a situation where you're posting on Reddit, panic because, oops, I'm in the middle of my SOC 2 audit, I need a pen test, you're then going to be making decisions very quickly, and maybe not do the best due diligence and researching your options, and you're just going to have to make a decision. And that's a great way to be taken advantage of. Like if you just like look at that thread, that person got solicited to by 15 different people, including myself, because I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'm like, listen, but I think it's there's such a big variance in what people will charge you for a penetration test. There's so much scope, even like just a scope within scope, right? What is even within the scope of the penetration test that you would like to perform, that can vary wildly. So you could be talking like anywhere from $2,000 to literally $100,000. Like, talk about a big difference, right? So it's a very costly, mistake that wasn't budgeted for. And then now they're salespeople love it when you have urgency, because you close the deal for them. And so when you can make these decisions on the front end and you can be informed, you can take your time, you're in a much better position to make the right decision.
Exactly. So you're right. Like, I want to kind of go back to the whole concept of, is it required? Is it not required? Like, yes, we did talk about, hold on, let me pull this up over here. Am I doing this one? Yeah. So we did talk about, yay, SOC 2 policy templates. Which reminds me, I should probably go comment on that. Right? Another one, SOC 2 policy templates, right? Another one, SOC 2 policy templates. But we're going to go back to this original one and talk about the requirements. And yes, this is us. We did comment on this. In fact, this came in the same day we did last week's session, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Principle 16, Principle 17, the common controls, and the things around that. So let me just take us back up here, and I'm going to put a little banner up for us around what is 16 and what is 17 and how they relate to the common controls. Let's see if I can do this. I don't want to do that one. I want to do this one. I want to come over here. I want to create a banner. I want to put this text here and add the banner and talk about, yay, look at that. How fast am I?
You're super fast.
Right? So CC 4.1 or COSO, the common control 16. So the entity selects, develops, and performs ongoing or separate evaluations to ascertain whether the component of the internal controls are present and functioning. Right? So this, when we started going through ours, and I'm talking to our SOC 2 attestation firm, this is what they brought up. How are you dealing with Principle 16 or CC 4.1? This is where that conversation of Are you doing a thing? Are you performing a thing? Did you develop some kind of program to figure out whether your things are effective or not? Now, this isn't just a vulnerability scan, because this talks about, are they effective, right? So a vulnerability scan can go find the stuff, but if we're not remediating them, if we're not actively throwing humans or penetrations at them, we're not really sure if they're present and functioning. Right? So for us, this is how we looked at, yeah, it's kind of a requirement in the sense that we can find stuff, but we want to make sure we're protected against those things are present and functioning that we're doing to mitigate those risks.
It's
Leslie, do you have
also,
any? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just kind of, I've got like a little bit of a cheat sheet over here, and there's, points of focus within the principle. So it's consider a mix of ongoing and separate evaluations. Exactly what we were just talking about, like a snapshot in time pen test versus continuous, things like vulnerability scanning. Establish a baseline understanding. Like, do I even understand what any of this means? Using knowledgeable personnel, like get the right people involved, and be objective. So separate evaluations perform. So they're also like kind of referring, like, that's why you use an auditor who's different from the the MSP that maybe helped you develop your policies, is because there has to be like an unbiased third party that's able to objectively look at your security and make an assessment on that. And so it's, you can you do an internal penetration test with your own people? Sure, you can, but it's much better to use a third party because you have an unbiased person who's coming in without that kind of internal knowledge, and really able to see like where your vulnerabilities are and where they're not, and provide an accurate assessment. I think I just kind of like went off topic of your actual question.
No, it's good. It's good. No, this is really helpful, because actually I went back to you. It's kind of funny. You said 15 minutes ago about locking the doors and doing the things, and I'm rereading what I wrote, and I was like, hey, wait, we said the same thing, right? Locking the doors and the windows to make sure that they're still locked and properly. So that's really funny, because you mentioned that a couple of minutes ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I know why I liked what you said, because I thought the same thing last week. Oh, if I only could remember what I would say and half the things that I kind of talk about. But yes, it's like trying to break into your house without causing damage. So, and then there's Principle 17, right? Principle 17 talks about, CC 4. Is it 4.2? Yeah, 4.2. Hold on, let's do this one as well. Let's do this one as well. And it's too many characters, so okay. Senior management, we'll just end it there, and I'll pull out Principle 17. I know it got cut off, but the context of this particular control is, are you doing it? Are you communicating what you're finding? Are you taking corrective action? Does leadership know? Right?
I would like to hand this over to Haley.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
because there's a very big, this is what I had an old boss. He always said the knowing doing gap, right? You know that you should do something, but do you do it? Right? And so say you implement a vulnerability scanning program, and penetration tests, and you get your vulnerabilities back. What do you do with them? Haley, I know Haley's had to, you got to fix this.
Yeah.
And so just go, Haley.
So that's like one of my main jobs, is reminding people who are very important people, because a lot of our companies, I'm talking directly to the CTO, the CEO. So I'm having to tell the CTO of a company, hey, I told you about these findings from your pen test. How's it going? Have you gotten them done yet? How's it going with these findings? Hey, these are critical. Can you take care of this, please? Or, hey, we found these. So I have to keep drawing them back to actually look at the findings and remediate them, and then remind them to work on them, and then remind them why it's important. Or the thing that they'll come to me for will be smaller items that we would consider best practices, but are still important. And they'll come back to me like, is this really important? Do I really need to fix this? So then I have to come back to them and say, hey, this is important. This is why it's important. Yes, you do need to fix it. One of their favorite like things that we run into is security headers. Nobody seems to like security headers. A lot of websites don't have them. And that is your reputation that you're putting at stake by not having them, because people can pretend to be you using your website. So it's one of the most important things. And that's where this piece comes in, is they have to fix these in a timely manner.
Aha.
Mhm.
So I love that. And Leslie, I'm going to call myself out here. Drop that. You have a free tool. Drop that tool
I
over
do.
here in chat. I want to call my own self out, right? For the dozen or so people that are listening here. Do you have the link? Give me the link in
Yeah,
chat.
it's actually, if you just go to securely.com, there's two places to do it. You can either type in your domain right on the home screen or click the free scan button up at the top.
All right,
And
all
it'll
right,
test
so-
against 7 different scans.
All right. So here we go. I am going to do PLIANCERI compliant. That's my old website. CESC score CARD.com. My brain is a little toast today. Sorry. All right.
Check the box.
Here goes nothing.
Click.
Here goes
There you go.
nothing. I'm scared.
It's going to take a minute, but I just kind of wanted to
All right.
speak to something.
So
like,
tell
I
me a
see
little
this-
bit about that. Tell me a little bit about that while
So-
that's running. So hold on, let's
Well-
do this, and we'll go ahead.
something that comes up when Haley is trying to communicate that these vulnerabilities need to be corrected is that a lot of people say, well, it doesn't apply to us, and sometimes it doesn't, right? So, but you have to provide evidence and speak to why it doesn't apply to you. So you can't, it does not suffice to be like, well, I don't need to do that. It doesn't apply to me. You have to provide evidence. You have to say, why doesn't it apply to you? What are the processes that you have in place that make it so, right? And then we compile that evidence into a remediation report that your auditor can then view. So it's fine if you don't need to fix a vulnerability for a very real reason. Just say so. But you have to state that. You have to provide the evidence as to why it does not apply to you. Just a side note on that.
No, we talk a lot about that because MSPs struggle with the doesn't apply to me, but more so their customers doesn't apply to me, and the reality is they probably do, especially if you're looking at cyber liability insurance. We're not going to go down that whole route today, but there's a lot of things that can force you into some of these requirements, right? I mean, we've been talking security stuff here. We haven't even touched on the privacy stuff, right? And I feel like as a community, we don't talk enough about the privacy things that affect almost every business globally. GDPR, California privacy, Vermont just came out with Utah, and the list goes on and on and on and on. I am not well versed enough yet to talk about the privacy stuff. We have a good friend, Brian Blakely, that can do that for us, but we don't even talk about the privacy things, right? So, all right, here we go. You mentioned security headers. Do I dare show my dirty laundry? All right, let's do it. Not too bad. Content security policy is cross-site scripting. Now, this has always been an interesting one for me, and I know that I could be doing a little bit better on our marketing website, right? On cross-site scripting. But let's do this again for our actual platform.
Your application.
Right?
Yeah. So just a note that, for people who want to check their security headers, you can use your app, your web app, usually like app.whatever.com. And you're also your just marketing facing website, which is also important to protect because, like Haley said, if someone can pretend to be you, just like you can spoof a phone number.
Why does it just did the same darn domain? Hold on, I have to maybe clear my cache on your website.
No, hold on. What is it? Is it app dot?
No, it's Goda, but I'm going to run it right now. I just cleared my cache. So anyways, long story short is our marketing website. Yes, I know XSS because we do a lot of, it's still doing the same domain. Why is it still doing the same domain? Maybe because I have cookies? I don't know.
It might be.
Let's do it.
Okay, go.compliance.
There, I will drop it in chat. You can share my dirty laundry there. It's in chat for you. Anyways, while you're doing that, yeah, I know cross-site scripting but our website has a lot of different embeds for videos for YouTube and stuff like that. And the more times we, embed YouTube links or whatever, cross-site scripting breaks. So yeah. All right, let me grab this link, copy that link. Let me go over here in a new incognito and I will present, share screen. Okay, here comes the dirty laundry. I think it's this one. Share. All right, so this is our platform, and hey, it looks pretty darn good. I got greens everywhere. That must be pretty. I mean, it does expose some information, but yay, I'm doing some of the things I'm supposed to be doing. So it looks a little like 0 failed. Woo-hoo! Good stuff.
Good.
Yeah.
So. But long story short is, is a penetration test required for SOC 2? And my answer is that depends. And that depends on how you have scoped it and how you may have incidentally scoped it in because of a policy template or some other thing, right? From a 10,000 foot view, you should be having these conversations at the very beginning of the engagement with your certified auditor doing this attestation, right? I think there's one more question we kind of want to talk a little bit about the last 5 or 6 or 7 minutes, and that is maybe Haley, you can talk about how has penetration testing helped organizations avoid pitfalls or bug bounties or closing deals, or how has a penetration test benefited not just an MSP but their small business as well? Maybe you could talk briefly about that.
Yeah. So we have a few different customers that have run into issues with needing a pen test, not necessarily for SOC 2 or ISO, but because their customers are asking for one. And providing not necessarily a clean pen test, but a pen test showing that they have actually looked for any vulnerabilities that they might have, and then showing that they're remediating those vulnerabilities has helped close deals. We had one customer that was looking to close a deal with Google, and we were even flexible because we had to reorganize the pen test to fit with Google standards, and that's now our pen test is with Google standards. But they asked for a little bit more detail than we had before, and asked for it organized in a more strict manner where you had to put in multiple locations what was found, what the risk level for what was found. And we had that, but they wanted it also in a list format before the actual information on the details findings, because we show details on each finding. But before that, they wanted an easy, quick list format. So little things like that, we flexed for them, and they were able to close the deal with Google. And then in another case, we had a customer that while we were in the middle of pen testing for them, we had to jump on a call with them to let them know about a vulnerability we found. And in the middle of that, it was like this crazy coincidence. They got an email from a bounty hunter. And thankfully, because we were in the middle of pen testing, we were able to tell them about the vulnerabilities so that the bounty hunter couldn't hold it over their head. And that can get kind of costly because depending on the level, there's guidelines for how much you should pay bounty hunters. And you don't necessarily want to pay them too often, but if they find real vulnerabilities, you do want to give them something, because otherwise especially if you don't fix them, they might exploit those findings. So that's another reason why pen testing is important, because if you're not doing it, a bounty hunter might be doing it for you, and they're going to be asking for more money than it would cost to have the pen test in the first place.
Exactly. So it's funny you're talking about, bug bounties and stuff like that. So in our trust center, maybe I should am I still sharing that real quick? I'm sharing that. So yeah, we talk about a bug bounty program in our trust center here at Compliance Scorecard. And it's interesting because there are people out there for both malicious intent, but also research intent, right? And also, some that are financially motivated, right? I won't get into how a potential incident happened where they used the whistleblowers law against the company that they hacked and reported it to the authorities like, hey, we hacked your stuff. You weren't going to pay us the bounty. So we went and reported it to the feds, which then made it way worse. So, excuse me. But yes, there are these, vendor vulnerability disclosures. CIS actually has this whole program around vulnerability disclosure and signing an agreement with CIS that we are going through that talks about we pledge to do ABC 1, 2, 3, XYZ as part of that CIS commitment to better protecting software and data and all of the things. And so,
Tim, I have a thought.
Go ahead.
I don't know, something about what you said, and also like the story that Haley was telling about closing the deal with Google, and it relates back to SOC 2, is that when companies are designing their vendor risk policy, they're scoping out like, what is it that we're going to be asking our vendors to have in order to show evidence that there's not going to be like a third party breach, right? That they're not going to be an entry point for malicious actors. So one of the very common things that they're putting into their own policies is requiring their vendors to have a penetration test. So although it's not required by SOC 2 or ISO to have a penetration test, it's likely, especially if you're working with mid-market or enterprise level customers, that they have policies requiring you to have a penetration test. So why not just get one? Even if you're not putting it in your policy, don't put it in your policy. Do it anyway.
Right.
Right.
Right. I love that.
So that way,
we do talk a lot about third and fourth party risk management. How many vendor questionnaires have you filled out? Right. And as an MSP, how many vendor questionnaires have you filled out on behalf of your customers? And have you dug through them to see if they actually, it might even just be a contractual requirement and nothing to do with SOC or ISO or some sort of attestation or certification. It could just be a contractual. Wow, that's a mouthful. Could be in a contract, right? And where it would be then required, right? So this third, fourth, nth number party risk management, even beyond SOC 2, it could be a requirement because of a contract.
And we've seen that before, like that it is in people's contracts with companies, and they want to keep their contract with their company, so they're being held to the standards of that company because maybe it's their largest paying customer, and they're at their mercy, and they don't want to lose the deal. So
just
do it.
It's fingers crossed. We've been fortunate, fingers crossed, even though we are doing our due diligence and our testing and our compliance, because compliance, like one of our customers has not yet asked us or forced us or required us to do penetration testing yet, but I can imagine as MSPs mature, they're going to start to ask those questions, or at least they should start to ask those questions of their vendors, like, prove it to me. Right.
Well, I think it's because a lot of MSPs were working with smaller businesses and they don't necessarily have their own policies in place because they're pursuing certifications, compliance for the first time. So they don't have as mature policies established like a mid-market or an enterprise level customer. But consider this as you build your own programs, and like when you're looking at third-party risk management, is that 98% of the organizations that have experienced a data breach within the last two years. So that's almost 100%, right? Meaning that almost every company that you can think of has a vendor that's experienced a breach. So it's 98% of organizations have a vendor that's experienced a breach within the last 2 years. So that's why you're seeing it come up. And as you build your own programs, consider yourself, because you think, well, it's not going to happen to me, right? I'm not going to get hacked by a hacker. Who even is a hacker anymore? And And it's like, oh, I'm not going to get in a car accident. Oh, I'm not going to get sick. There's all sorts of, we never think bad things are going to happen to us. And then they do. And oftentimes it can be through a third party. They're a backdoor into your system. So it's important to like have your own hygiene, require hygiene of your vendors, and have a plan in place. And then also there's this crazy phenomena that people don't think lightning strikes in the same place twice. Well, one, it can, and two, when it comes to being hacked, it's especially likely that you're going to be hit again because now you're a vulnerable target.
Yep.
Now people know you don't have good security hygiene. And so it's you want to say like, oh, well, it's already happened, right? It's not going to happen again. No, it's more likely to happen again. And so I've encountered people that are like, they've had a data breach and they're like, no, I don't know. It's not going to happen again. Yes, it will. Yeah. Soapbox.
So no, I think that's great. So, gosh, so many thoughts.
It's a fun conversation to have.
Well, you know what? We'll save those for next week, right? One of the things that we like to do here during our sessions is help, have our MSPs and our listening audience like leave with something, right? And so, Haley, let's talk about like one key takeaway from today's session that, an MSP could consider today.
I think they should consider a pen test. I think they should consider getting a pen test just because it could save them money in the long run or get them money in the long run, either getting them deals or saving them from a bounty hunter or a hacker or data breach, their reputation. So I think it's important, even if it's not required. I think it brings money to have the pen test, so it's worth the money to spend on the pen test.
So you got to spend money to make money.
Yeah.
Have we been saying that for centuries here as a capitalized nation? So, good stuff, Haley. Thank you, Leslie. Leslie, what about you, my friend?
I think my biggest takeaway or thought is to have the right team in place. So, like whether maybe you understand HR, great. Then do you have someone technical? Because you cannot possibly be a single person that has all of the answers. So collaborate and get a good team in place, whether you're the MSP or you're the ultimate end user, so that you also don't end up in a situation where, well, I just put that we were going to have a penetration test because it was in the policy template and I didn't really know what that meant. And I just thought it sounded good, right? You just don't want to be in that situation. So assemble a team of people with skills that can collaborate and come up with the best posture for you.
Love that. You stole my thunder, because I always talk about have the human, have the people, have the champion, then have the process, have the thing, and figure out the tool last, right? So, but for me, for today's session, I think for the key takeaway, when you're working through and considering a SOC 2 attestation or ISO or any of that for that matter, make sure you have the key stakeholders at the table. Make sure that you're understanding the actual scope of the work that they're doing, right? We talked last week about what are the roles, what are the endpoints, what are the things, what's the parameters, right? So making sure that in the beginning of these kinds of things, you scope it appropriately. Heck, we even talk about that in CMMC all the time because we want to scope things out as much as possible. So I would say I actually have two key takeaways. The first is make sure you're scoped appropriately. And then make sure you don't incidentally scope something back in by a policy template that you downloaded off the interwebs, right? So make sure you scope appropriately and make sure you don't incidentally or accidentally scope something back in that you probably shouldn't have. That would probably be my takeaways.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I think that's why it's important to have people on your team that can actually understand what's in the policy. from a variety of different angles, but then also consider, I know compliance scorecard is kind of a tool by MSPs for MSPs, but this is an important thing to consider is it's a plug for MSPs, right? I mean, if you want to maybe you don't have the right team in your small business, to build these controls. Well, MSPs are invaluable resources. They come to you with expertise. They have the right teams. They understand, what all these criteria are, and they can be a huge benefit and resource for you. And it can be less expensive than trying to go out and then hire someone internally. And then you have to pay their benefits package too, their health insurance and their PTO and all those things. And
Oh, you mean
then
all that overhead and fringe? That's a whole
all
other
the overhead.
conversation.
Then you gotta put the job description on there. You gotta filter through, 100 different applications. You go through the interview process. Well, then by that point, you've delayed your ability to actually pursue a certification. So just consider using an expert, right? Consider using an MSP. They've done this before, and you'll be in good hands.
Yeah, I love that. And thank you for tying it back into the MSP community and the small business community, right? Because we work with MSPs, but it's really the small business community that we care. I mean, I care about the MSPs, don't get me wrong, but we care about, protecting the small businesses, the ones that say it'll never happen until it happens, right? And there's dozens and dozens of stories of when it has actually happened. So, so thanks for that. So next week, listening audience and those that may have actually watched this all the way through, thank you for staying. We're really excited about next week because it's all around how to package, price, and profit from Pentests, right? And how they can relate to SOC 2, right? Probably something Leslie knows way more about than I do is packaging, pricing, and how to take this to market as an MSP and make money at it. So we'll have everybody back next week, Thursday at 1:00. Fingers crossed our flight home from PAX 8 Beyond gets us home in time. If not, I'll be doing it from my phone in an airplane. But we're really excited next week, how to package, price, and profit for pen testing. And so any final words from either of you?
Nope.
Alrighty. So for those of you here, thank you so much. We will be at PAX 8 Beyond starting next week. Really lots of exciting things happening with Compliance Scorecard. Maybe some announcements happening around versions and stuff like that happening next week. Do the follow and the like things. For those of you that will be at PAX 8, come on by, say hello, shake our hand. We always have awesome candy at our booth. The other vendors really love it because they, like, in between, come and grab my candy all the time. So we're really looking forward to PAX 8 next week. Thank you, everybody. Have yourself a good rest of your week, and we'll see you next week.
Subscribe now.